Hey folks, Justin with Effective Remote Work. Today I wanted to spend a little bit of time diving into my current Notion setup. It's August 2020, and I haven't done one of these videos for a number of months now. Over that time, my productivity system has gone through a number of revisions and changes. I've gone into OmniFocus, I've gone out of OmniFocus, I've gone straight onto paper, I've done things straight out of my head, and nothing has really settled until now. And that is a combination of using Notion with the bullet journal, a hybrid system between digital and analog tools of sorts. The way that I'm structuring this is that I see my shorter term work being in the bullet journal, which has historically worked really well for me, and keeping track of my long-term work inside of Notion. So in bullet journal type terms, I'm doing my rapid logging and daily planning and such inside of the bullet journal on paper. And I'm doing my monthly logs and my future logs inside of Notion. I'm using different terms at this point in time inside of Notion, but it generally is applicable when you look at the core foundations of what I'm doing here. Additionally, I wanted to have a system that was cross-platform. I've moved into using Linux for some development work. Plus, I also use macOS, iOS, and iPadOS. I wanted to have something that was available across all of those devices instead of just a few of them. So that's why I ended up moving off of a tool like OmniFocus. The foundations of this system really originate from three main sources. First, August Bradley's life operating system that he builds inside of Notion. There are some great principles and ideas that I've pulled out as far as building the productivity system inside of Notion from his videos, though this is far, far, far less complex. Second, the theme system by CGP Grey and Mike Hurley. I have found over time that my planning and long-term goal setting of sorts is much better governed by a theme or a single word for the year, rather than a set of concrete goals that I want to achieve in a set time period. That mode just doesn't work with the way I operate. I need to be a little more fluid. I have kids. The landscape around me is changing very quickly all of the time. So I need a way to be able to adjust, and a theme I have found has been a very easy way to do that. And lastly, the system has largely been influenced by some of my own experimentation inside of Notion. Many of the components in this system may look familiar if you saw my previous video on my Notion setup from, I think, January of this year. I'll put a link in the description below for you to check that out if you haven't seen that yet. So if we look at the bottom here, I have three main pages. This is a demo database here, so most of this information is real, but I've scrubbed out some of the personal details. I've got three buckets, one a Launchpad, which is basically my main dashboard. There's not much there, which I'll show you in just a moment. There are boards, which are my status boards, things that I want to keep track of. I have one at this moment in time. There may be more in the future, but since this is kind of a version 1 of this system, I wanted to keep it simple. And lastly, buckets. These are the main pages that I am using to keep track of all of the stuff. And there's a lot of relational databases in here, which is probably where we'll spend the majority of the time today. Click into the Launchpad. Like I said, this is very, very simple. It's just a link to my daily status board at this point in time. Here's the status board. At the top, I have a big picture section. This is where I see my yearly theme for the year, my season plan, and then my active projects that I have. Yearly theme, you can see these two are in gallery view here, so I can see information on them. I've hidden some information from the yearly theme because it was a little bit more personal in nature, but generally I'm listing out in the yearly theme a few things that I'm seeing as being potential approaches for this year or what this year means to me. This just serves as a reminder of where I'm going, what I feel is important for this year. And then moving into the season plan, I tend to plan in seasons. So they generally map to quarters of the year, but they can be a little bit more flexible than that. So I list out general desired outcomes, and then I have active projects for that season as well. That's a relational tie over to active projects, my projects database, so that I can see right within there exactly what I have going on at that moment in time. I try to keep that fairly small. There are some recurring or continual projects that I have on my plate that will exist for a long period of time, things that I'm responsible for. but generally those projects are buckets for tasks and other information. So I've got a couple different projects over here that I'm actively working on, like stabilizing my productivity system, preparing for fall and winter with the pandemic, and Obsidian Made Simple. Quick little teaser is I'm working on a course for Obsidian with Francesco D'Alessio of Keep Productive, and we're looking on releasing that very soon. Stay tuned for information on that. In fact, if you're interested in keeping tabs on when Obsidian Made Simple is released, be sure to sign up to our newsletter at Effective Remote Work. We will be announcing it there when that is done. All right, down to this week, the next section. This is the second major section of my daily status board. This is where I have my weekly plans database linked here, where I can see the plan for this week. If I click into that, you can see that I have August 17th through 23rd. You can see that I have a couple different properties here where I link it up to the season so that it's there. I have a weekly review that's tied with that. And then there's a roll up here that shows basically on the weekly review, if there's a checkbox that's completed, then it says 100%, just to kind of signify that there is a completed weekly review there. Then down here, this is where some of the familiarity comes in with my previous setup. I have a few different things that I keep track of. I have a main focus for the week, which is to schedule recording this week. Then under commitments, I list out Monday through Sunday and just kind of briefly list out the main big picture things that need to happen in the week. So these are calendar events generally. There are things that I need to keep top of mind that are happening in the week. And then down here is an actions database, which are the items that are due this week. Under that are the intentions of this week. These are things that I've scheduled that might not necessarily be due, but they're things that I need to make sure that happen within that given week. But if they don't necessarily happen, it's okay. Under that, I have another quick way to access my actions for this week. This is both due and my scheduled date for the week. I use the due date, DO, like August Bradley uses, which is really nice if I want to schedule something. That was something that I was finding as a shortcoming of the bullet journal. I found it really, really difficult to be able to schedule something and say, hey, I actually want to work on this thing on Thursday, but it's Monday. But I don't really have a very easy way to do that without putting a bunch of information in random different places. And so what I generally do is if I have something I want to schedule, I'll either write it on a note card inside of my bullet journal just as a reminder for later in the week, or if it makes more sense to do so, I'll add it to this actions database and assign a DO due date. Lastly, on the status board, I have a link to my habits database. I recently had a tweet out there where I said that I don't track my habits. And that's relatively true. I used to use a habit tracker like Streaks to track my habits very religiously for a long period of time. I think I had habit streaks well north of like 150 days on probably 3 or 4 different habits. And what I found when I was doing that is that I was just not really, succeeding with it. The beginning was great because it just served as a reminder to keep doing it. But over time, it became more about checking the box of completing that habit than actually doing the habit from a place of my own drive, motivation, and values. Therefore, I found continuing those habits to be a weight instead of something that I wanted to do. Something I've been experimenting with and that's been working so far for a longer period of time has been just having a habits view, where I just list out the habits that I want to have and their recurrence and what time of the day that I'm looking to do them. So, and this has worked really well for exercise and starting my workday with eating the frog. I get up, I do some stuff with my kids, and then right before my workday starts, I go out for a walk or a bike ride. And then when I start my workday, the very first thing I do is my number one list on my most important tasks for the day. I pick 3 most important tasks for the day, and I pick number 1 to be the frog that I'm eating for the day. That's the very first thing that I'm working on. Is usually a deep work task. Sometimes it's creating something like this video. And then once I'm done with that, I can move into other tasks a lot easier. I have momentum because I have exercised, I've set myself forth doing something physical, I've done something mentally strenuous right away in the morning, and then the rest of the day seems to go much more smoothly. Anyway, that's the idea behind having this habits tracker here. Well, it's not really a tracker, but just habits view. It's there to remind me that these are the habits to say, these are the things that I want to be doing at these times of day. If I do them, awesome. If I don't, that's okay too. I try to accomplish these as often as I can though. Next, we'll go into the buckets database. This gives kind of a overarching view of the things and the components of the system that tie into that daily status board. First, we'll look at yearly themes. This is a basic database where I have the year, the title of the theme, which 2020 is the year of stabilization for me. Then I link up my season plans and then theme spokes, which we'll get to in just a second. This is a really easy way for me to just pop in and take a look at stuff for my theme for the year and see kind of where it's at. I can dive into different aspects of it. It's a very nice and easy way to roll up information together. Almost everything that is in these sets of databases rolls up into a yearly theme. If they don't roll up into a yearly theme, then they will roll up into an area. We'll look at areas in just a second, but we'll talk about theme spokes first. Theme spokes are the different components of a theme or different areas that I feel a theme targets for the year. So in stabilization for 2020, I see that as stabilizing my productivity and technology workflows. There's been a lot of churn in that over the last couple of years. I want to settle that down. I also want to focus on building stable relationships with others, both old and new, just a level of intentionality of connecting with other people. I also want to stabilize my family after the many changes that we've had over the last few years. If you followed my podcast process at all, you know we've had a baby in the last year, a new job, we've moved houses, we've had a lot of different things going on, and I want to make sure that we're intentional to stabilize these changes so that our family can grow more healthily going forward. You can't be in a constant state of flux and make sure that you're building solid foundations at the same time. Then lastly, I have my side business here with effective remote work, and I want to stabilize it to make it sustainable on its own. I've been investing a lot of my own money into it, and that's been great and all, because I love producing this content. I love producing videos and podcasts that are helpful to you, but I'd love to make it sustainable so that it can run on its own. So that's a summary of my theme spokes right now and kind of the general idea of what it is. These all tie into the theme. Different projects, that's a key thing here too. I want to make sure that I have projects that are associated with these theme spokes so that I have a semblance of a direction of where I'm taking that, and then they all tie up to an area as well. Okay, into areas, we'll take a look there. These are basically just major bucket areas for my life. So I've got discourse, which is my primary job, effective for my remote work, which is this YouTube channel and side business, home, family, relationships, and self-improvement. Fairly simple. I'll probably add a few in these areas if I want to get a little bit more granular, but the higher level that I keep it is usually the better for myself. Next, we're looking kind of down at the next level of planning that I have, which is season plans, weekly reviews, and projects. Season plans, as I've talked about previously, are my main way that I plan out the year. My theme influences the directions and decisions that I'm making, and then my plan for the season is kind of what influences the actions that I'm taking towards those themes. So if I look at one of these examples here, I have a set of desired outcomes, which is to stabilize my productivity system, to launch Obsidian Made Simple, and to prepare for fall and winter with the pandemic. As you can see, those things directly correlate with projects that I have, and therefore have direct actions associated with them as well. You can see the active projects that I have for the season. There are recurring projects in here, or persistent projects, like I like to call them, which we'll show you in just a second. And then there are projects that have a actual end date or completion state to them. I find it really helpful to have these all rolled up together into a season plan. This is kind of the main bucket that I work from largely, just because that's about 3 months is a time frame that works really well for me to keep everything all together end in mind. If I get too much longer than that, it's really hard to adjust. It's really hard to get my mind around it, but 3 months is a good frame to be able to achieve something or complete certain projects. Weekly plans, we looked at these already on the daily status board, but this is how the database looks. If I have a weekly review assigned to it and that weekly review is checked completed, then this shows up as 100%, just a signifier that it's done. If I go back and into the weekly reviews, all this is a templated checklist, and I'll show you what that looks like. Go into last week's. Again, pretty simple here, but I'm doing a mind sweep. And in my bullet journal, I'm listing out my biggest wins, how far I got on my big 3 for the week, and then answering some questions, some reflection on the last week. Did I meet my commitments? Did I accomplish my intentions? Did I pursue my habits? Did I focus on the most important things? What did I do to stay challenged? And is there anything to try next week? And I'm realizing now that I probably should have gone into this one because it's a lot easier to read. So there it is. Then I'm mapping on my calendar any major to-dos that I need to keep track of, or on the actions list with the due or scheduled date. I'm listing out my big 3 for the upcoming week that I want to get done, and then I'm writing out a self-care plan. Some of this is coming from the weekly preview from the Full Focus Planner. I really liked that, but all the structure inside the Full Focus Planner is something that I didn't really like. I felt like I was using it a lot less and using a lot less of the space in there. And that just really bothered me. And so instead of trying to force myself to use it, I decided to take the aspects of it that I found helpful, which are the daily big 3 and then the weekly preview aspects. And then I've added my own flair to them as well. So then when I get done with the weekly review, I just check completed and then I move on to the next one. Now, a side note here is that all of these databases have templates. So if I open up this template here, you can see it's just the checklist here. Some of them use a special database inside, which I'll show you in just a second when we get down into projects, but all of these have templates. Okay, in projects, fairly simple. These are longer term things that I'm working on that have more than a few action steps to them. I don't take the traditional getting things done approach to project management where if it's more than one task that you need to have a project for it. If I have a couple of tasks in a row that are associated together, I'll just write them down in my bullet journal. These are more end goals, so to say. So like I'm working on a plugin for Discourse that allows Discourse communities to sell subscriptions to help support their communities in a self-sustained manner. And we're looking at releasing version 1 of that. So I've got a project for that. There's multiple things going on with that. It's going to take multiple weeks to get to that point, but that's essentially a longer term project for me. I've mentioned this a couple times already, but I've got this persistent checked box over here. And these are projects that will stay for the long term. These are areas that I have responsibilities in, but there may be tasks that surface every once in a while with them that I'm going to want to track over a longer period of time. Let's take a look at the template here because I think this is something interesting. And we'll open this as a page. So there's really not too much here, but we've got actions that are associated in a relational database, areas, season, theme spoke, persistent completed, just some simple database properties for it. But then in the template, we have this linked database to the actions database. And this is filtered where the project contains project template. This is a fantastic feature because you can add a linked database view inside of your templates that pull in from another database where there's a relation to it, to that item, where you can pull in all the items associated with that. What's cool about this is that then when I hit new here under this project, that automatically all of these tasks are then associated with this project. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to add extra metadata. So if I go back under, let's see, Discourse subscriptions, you can see that I have some objects or some actions here. If I want to add something else, All I have to do is hit new, type in the name of the task, and then it automatically is associated with that project. Very, very helpful. The thing that I love about using Notion in this way is really the fact that I can make it whatever I want it to be. If I want a feature, I can just add it inside of the database. Now, there's obvious restrictions with this because you can't program automatic things to happen. You probably can do some of that when you get access to the Notion API if you're a paid user later on down the road. But at this point in time, we don't have access to that. I'm not a big automation person either, but that'll be interesting to see what some folks are starting to do with Notion when they can start to automate it through the API. We already looked at the habits database, which is essentially the same thing on the daily status board. Let's just take a look at actions really quick. Okay, so in here, I've got a couple of different views. I've got the default view. I've got a scheduled view, which shows when I want to do things. It's a quick and easy way to see what my week looks like. That's totally taken straight off of August Bradley's setup. And then just a simple database. I've got the task name, completed, the kind. I like to sort things by kind sometimes, especially if I need to decide on something, if there's something I want to research, or if it's a shopping list item or recurring. Associated project, associated area, the due date, DO, the scheduled date, the due date, DUE, the date that it's due. And then I have parent and dependent tasks set up here. It's something I've been experimenting with from August Bradley's system. I haven't used it too intently. I'm probably not going to use it just because I've scaled back how I'm using this a little bit. I got a little bit further in and I've kind of whittled away some of the things that don't work for me. And I found that one to be a little bit kludgy to work with just for myself. It's really powerful to be able to put dependencies to tasks so that you do them in kind of an order. However, it's just a little bit too clumsy for me to work with. If I really wanted to do something like that, I should stick with OmniFocus and their sequential projects because it works way, way, way easier than how just using the database associations and relations inside of Notion. Then lastly, at the bottom here, I have just a bucket for effective remote work, some different projects and information that I have in there. My content calendar, I'll show you what that looks like really quick. So I have here listed out all the content and frequency in brackets at the top of the database where I've got YouTube, remotely working, one of my podcasts, my newsletter and process, another one of my podcasts, and then the content calendar here just basically shows when I am recording certain things, and then it shows when they're releasing and the status of them. I've got a lot of different views in here. I've got things that are coming out this week, things that are in flight, which means they're out of pre-production and they are in production now and they're ready to keep moving. And then just different lists here for YouTube, remotely working, process, newsletters, and so on and so forth. I have a number of templates over here as well, which I'll show you one of these. And this is basically the database here. I've got a number if I want to keep track of the order of things are in, the publish date, the channel that it's going to, which is either YouTube or one of my podcasts or the newsletter, status, we've got production, pre-production, production, needs editing, post-production, and completed. If there's a guest, then I can create a linked reference to that guest, the URL, and then an outline. So I'll do my outlining for content in here, the summary of the content, and then the rest of the description. This is what I would copy into the YouTube description field when I'm publishing a YouTube video. And then under buckets, I also have a resonance calendar, which is basically just a database in a calendar view where I can clip articles to it. I took it straight from Ali Abdaal. I love this idea. It's a really great, quick, easy way to clip articles and things that I want to share on my newsletter. I can see when I clipped them, likely when I shared them, so that I'm not sharing out duplicate content. Anyway, that's a quick tour of my Notion setup for August of 2020. I really hope you found it helpful. If you did, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Likewise, if you're interested in keeping track of what's happening with the Obsidian Made Simple course, be sure to sign up for the newsletter at effectiveremotework.com/newsletter. We'll be announcing it on there as soon as it goes live. Again, I'm doing that in collaboration with Francesco D'Alessio of Keep Productive. I'm really excited to get this one out, and if there's anything you'd like to see in that course or on this channel, be sure to put it in the comments below, and subscribe and like this video if you found it helpful. Again, Justin with Effective Remote Work, thanks for watching.